Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 268 of Album of the Day, in which for today's album review I'm going to be talking about a UK post-punk outfit that have been around for a few years now and actually have had a pretty huge following ever since 2017 when the band started dropping some of their most well-known singles and stuff like that, and they went on tour a lot, but it ultimately took them a few years to actually put out a full-length album, even though they did put out an EP in 2018, and it mostly had to do with, struggles with, their record label and stuff like that. I mean, their huge following even led to them trying to sign with a major label, but then of course realizing that they didn't have if they had signed to a major label, they wouldn't necessarily have the full creative control that they wanted. Of course, I am talking about the post-punk, or really like the very recontextualizing post-punk kind of band, HMLTD. So I'm here to review their debut album, which after years of finding a record label and finally signing to Lucky Number Recordings, was released on February 7th, 2020, and the album is called West of Eden. This is a band that I definitely knew that. And even though this band, their most well-known songs date all the way back to like 2017, I actually didn't know about this band at all until 2020 and seeing Anthony Fantano do a review of the record. But obviously he's been a fan since they dropped like their To the Door single in 2017. Shouted that out as one of his favorite singles of that year, and also did a review of their Hate Music, Delete, or whatever that EP is called, from 2018, so I decided, hey, he seems to be really into what this band is doing, how about I give them a go? And I'm so glad that I did, because West of Eden may very well be one of my favorite albums of 2020. It's definitely, like I said, this is the kind of group that is playing post-punk, that's for sure, but what they are also doing is definitely doing something that's definitely not very much post-punk. I mean, they're pulling from, like, country and pop and trap and classical and musical theater and all this stuff. Like, what they're doing is like literally just doing post-punk as if it existed during like the Baroque period or something like that. Right from the opening track, The West is Dead, even though it definitely is recognizably post-punk, it's got that very growly, hypnotic bass line, the twangy guitars, and the very sort of fidgety vocals. And the vocals on here actually really remind me of like a shoo-shoo track a little bit, as do the kind of disturbing lyrics, which are kind of somewhat political, sort of, in how, and it describes in pretty grotesque detail just how, the world is just, it's a mess right now, from, two dogs floating belly side up in the river, as well as football fans with their heads in their hands, and stuff like that. And then the song turns into this very, like, kind of unsettling piece of, like, synth punk at the end, with these roaring synths, as well as plenty of noise going on, and just the singer just shouting in such a manic way. It's definitely a pretty good way to open the record, even though I will say my one issue with the track is, the lyrics can be a bit stream of consciousness at times, and I do wish the song were a little more direct. I mean, like, the lyrics at the beginning, for me, are a little more memorable than maybe the what's being said for the rest of the track. I don't know. That's just me. The next track, Loaded, is this like really electrifying piece of what I call, get this, goth trap. I mean, from the guitars to the buzzing synths and to that skittering kind of nervous beat on top of that, as well as the vocals, which can be a bit freaky at times and somewhat sadistic, as Fantano says, and the lyrics I heard are actually sort of about like the band's struggle with Sony, the major label that they were signing to, and sort of their complicated feelings about it. Like they sort of felt like some of their creative control was taken from them, but yet at the same time there's also people within Sony that they really liked, so it was a bit of a hard decision they had to make, and he's sort of so the lyric of like, I sold my soul to the devil tonight, is kind of a metaphor for kind of selling yourself to some sort of like big organization and not really knowing what you're going to get out of it. And the song just kicks ass. I love the hook on this track. I love how just sort of, edgy it feels. It's definitely a highlight for me. The next track, the Ballad of Calamity James, is a bit of an interlude on the record, but man does it leave an impression. It definitely sounds like, it definitely has a little more of a country feel to it, with the guitars are twangy, and they sound like something out of a spaghetti western or even a Tarantino movie. There's like, as well as these very melancholy kind of choirs and percussion. It's definitely a really cool kind of more cinematic moment on the record. And it transitions very well into To the Door, which I already highlighted is one of the band's first big singles, and this song does a really good job of sort of contextualizing post-punk as if it were some sort of like old-timey spaghetti western, from the galloping drums to the lead guitar riff, and also I love the kind of manically shouted vocal performance, like, where do you think you're going with that bag of yours? To the door, hoo ha, to the door. It's like, it's so catchy and, kind of punky. And then the song takes a pretty subversive turn in the chorus and goes for these kind of skittering trap beats. So it's such a wild combo of sounds going on here, but believe me, it really works. And I also love the kind of guttural shouts in the outro are definitely a very nice touch as well. The next track, Satan, Luella, and I, is definitely one of my favorite tracks here. It definitely is really where that whole like musical theater, I think, element comes in. It definitely has some gothy elements to it, from the pipe organs and the vocals definitely have that sort of feel to them as well. And then the song transitions into this like saxophone heavy kind of it's like kind of piano post-punk. It's like a sound I don't quite know how to describe. It sort of sounds as if you crossed like some classic post-punk with I don't know, a musical like Les Mis or something like that. I know it's kind of a crazy sort of comparison to make, but believe me, it really works in the case of the song. Like I love the like kind of mystical vocal performances on there, as well as the lyrics sort of using kind of personifying Satan as if she's this woman whom the main person narrating in the song is attracted to and talking about how she's talking in length about Orson Welles, and then lyrics like "lamb's blood running down your door" sort of gives me the feeling as if maybe he's hallucinating or something like that. And I just love how sadistic these lyrics really are. And even though the song is 6 minutes long, it really manages to stay engaging the whole time, even in that kind of slow intro. Sure. The next track, Mikey's song, is this really cool piece of synth pop that is kind of a song that sort of deals with celebrity culture and kind of the complicated feelings we have with some of our favorite, famous singers or whatever. And in this case, it's somebody talking about this person that not only not only has a song they really like, but also he's sort of attracted to this person as well. But then sort of finding out his story, and then this person's story, and then sort of kind of developing this relationship where he kind of doesn't want to like this person because of things he did, but also just can't stop playing their song. And also just love how catchy the song is. The production is very colorful. It actually kind of sounds a little bit like maybe something like Kieran J. Callanan could do something like this as well. I mean, this sounds very much inspired by his Bravado record, which I do highly recommend, by the way. The next track, is this I've heard it described as like anime pop or something like that. And that kind of makes sense given the foreign lyrics, the use of kodo on the track, the percussion sounds definitely very much like, I don't know, Japanese or something like that. And then the song has this really kind of triumphant transition into these lovely strings and flamenco guitars and stuff like that. It's definitely yet another strange combo that really manages to work, and it is definitely one of the more, I think, adorable moments on the record. Actually, it's definitely a perfect example of how this album really has a thing where certain songs don't sound like other moments on the record, and yet it still feels very cohesive. Like the band very much, has a vision as to what they're doing here, sort of creating this very strange, subversive, like rock opera, I guess you could call it. The next track, 149, is sort of where, the themes of darker topics like, depression and stuff like that definitely do kind of come into play, and yet the beat is just so incredibly catchy. And I also love how melodic the song is, especially in that chorus featuring Tallulah Eden, and also the song features these very dramatic breaks of like huge synths, like like are kind of epic, which I do really like, and I also love how the vocals change from being kind of monotone and sort of suave, and then they get rather kind of anxious toward the middle as well. The next song, Joanna, is yet another cut that definitely takes things for a very theatrical turn. I've actually heard that the song is like about a man who was like born with gender dysphoria and identified himself as a woman, and like people just could not accept, that he was identifying as a woman, and would do things to her, like it would do things to him, like like judging him, as well as kind of like beating him up and stuff like that. And it's like the kind of song where it's this story is sort of portrayed in a very vague kind of manner, but yet you sort of know that something really serious is going on here, because the song's just so, like, you know, it's fun, but it's also depressing at the same time. I mean, like, the more I listen to it, I can't help but just kind of, you know, shed a tear a little, because it's definitely the kind of thing that I think a lot of people that have gone through, like, gender dysphoria and a similar thing could most certainly relate to. And I also love the jaunty pianos, the very morbid choir on the track. I think is really nice, really gorgeous use of Celeste on there too. To an acoustic guitar, and then it transitions into the frenetic post-punk of Where's Joanna, which is kind of a sister track, and sort of puts a whole new twist on it, like as if this is becoming a bit of a murder tale or something like that. I mean, you could tell just by the very gruesome detail in the lyrics that, you know, this story is taking a somewhat kind of that the story has taken a somewhat dark kind of twist, but, you know, I think it's very welcoming at the same time. Love the frantic guitar leads on there. Love how twangy they are. Are the very urgent background vocals and drums, and then that bridge is like incredibly unsettling with the guttural shouting and the instrumentation going a little crazy, like going a little crazy. It's definitely one of my favorite moments on here. And yeah, another moment on the record where I don't feel like I'm listening to music. I feel like I'm like watching this, you know, just pretty amazing kind of theater production or something like that. Like, I feel like I'm watching something on, like, this, you know, stage with lots of colorful lights and stuff like that. Like, so stuff like that. I mean, I can't even think of another post-punk band that's quite doing something as inventive as that. The next track, Death Drive, is easily the most unsettling track on the record. From the lyrics, which definitely, as you could tell from the title, are definitely very much about death and how, you know, someone's just kind of losing his mind over things he's done, and I also love how harrowing the song is musically, from these huge layers of, like, buzzing bass synth that are just, like, so in your face, and, like, that moment where you just hear the bang is just like, I feel like I'm being sucked into this black hole or something like that. It sort of actually reminds me a little bit of maybe like Daughter's last album, and just how distorted and just how, like, you know, and just how terrifying the song really is. And the way that it ends is quite unexpected. The way how it ends with you know, a sample of what sounds like a news report of some car accident where there's like one person dead and like six other trauma patients, and you'll hear, and there's like a sound effect of the car actually crashing, and it's kind of crazy how that whole thing makes a transition into the poppiest track on the record, Nobody Stays in Love. I mean, I've heard Anthony Fantano say that this has the kind of hook that Ariana Grande could sing, but then also there's definitely other pop singers who could do it. I mean, the instrumentation, the beat on it actually reminds me of Brockhampton a little bit, from the trap drums to the samples, and so to the pitch-shifted vocal samples in the background, as well as kind of how atmospheric the song is. But then the song also features a kind of twangy guitar riff, just to show us that, this is still coming from a post-punk band. And lyrically, I mean, even lyrically, this is the kind of song that would just be like a huge radio hit if it were sung by somebody else. Because a lot of mainstream pop definitely takes on themes of love and depression and stuff like that, as Anthony Fantano also said. And I will say it's definitely one of the best tracks on the record. I mean, the song is so incredibly catchy, and it's definitely a little bit of a risk the band took here that I think paid off very well. Well, there is sadly a kind of head-scratching moment after that with a track called, like, I don't know, like MMXX80 or something like that. But either way, it's not my favorite track on here. Just not crazy about that speaking sample, or like, yeah, it sounds like the kind of thing that, it just sounds like an idea that isn't quite very fleshed out and didn't really need to be slapped onto the album as kind of an interlude. It sort of feels just really pointless in my opinion. The next track, Blank Slate, definitely, however, is a really excellent track. I mean, this song would have been likely an excellent closer for the record. I mean, it literally feels like a closer from just how triumphant the marching band-esque hook is, and the way that the song ends with this melancholy piano and like female vocal at the end definitely sounds like something that could easily be the end of the record. And kind of like The West is Dead, the song also seems to take on a bit of a political sort of angle in terms of its subject matter. I also love how kind of Beatle-y the song is, and also, like, it definitely sounds inspired by country because of those, those layers of slide guitar, the twangy riff, and the the drums. I mean, this definitely sounds very much inspired by, like, some old school country music, for sure. Tree music, and also love the hook on here. The world is a blank slate. The world is a blank slate. It's definitely a song that it's definitely sounds like a very triumphant victory lap for sure. Right there. The closer on here is actually the track "War Is Looming," which is definitely the most country-tinged moment on the record. I mean, you've got the twang, you've got the acoustic guitar, piano, upright bass, there's some fiddle on there as well. Pretty gorgeous instrumentation, even though this is yet another moment on the record that I'm not exactly fond of. I mean, I'm just like, the lyrics are pretty basic, just, a war is coming, pick a side, pray you survive. It's just like, it's very cliched and sort of feels very unnecessary. And when the band tries to do like other weird things, like, the pitch shifted hand claps and chants, as well as the children's choir, they ultimately sound kind of gutless, because maybe because of the kind of subpar way in which they're mixed, or because of like because of how undercooked they feel. The song, however, does have a kind of like its predecessor, does kind of have a bit of an interesting outro. Like, the way it ends seems definitely very much like a closer in a way, but just seems like a less kind of less interesting and affecting one than the one from Blank Slate. It's definitely like this track, kind of like that interlude about 2 tracks ago, definitely are some duds on the record. But overall, I think this is a really good album. I mean, I definitely don't quite get, why I, kind of slept on some of the teasing singles from it for so long, because, apparently there are just some really excellent songs that the band had put out. So I'm late to the party here, but I'm definitely glad I eventually became a guest at that party. In that party, if there is another thing that I think could be improved a little, it's, I don't know, maybe some consistency. The band does so many things on this album, and though they all actually flow together cohesively, which I'm very impressed by, it's still it still needs to be maybe tightened up a little on their next record. I mean, if they did that, they would just only continue to get better. But still, this is an amazing record. Definitely worth checking out if you want to hear post-punk that maybe doesn't sound just like, any post-punk you've heard. That's just kind of reviving what bands have done in the 80s, and you want to hear bands that are actually, taking them to new places. So, strong 8 out of 10 for this new HMLTD record, West of Eden, and I'll see you for episode 269.